Hi, everybody. I'm Kurt Wooker Jr. There's no junior on there. That's fine. So I'm CEO of Gorilla Pool. It's a Bitcoin, specifically Bitcoin SV mining pool. I'm a Bitcoiner since 2012, and I'm also the chief Bitcoin historian at CoinGeek.com. It is my goal in life to right the wrongs of a whole bunch of things, primarily the Bitcoin Civil War, which is why I'm here. And also just sort of fill people in on what they know or what they think they know about Bitcoin specifically, but blockchain generally. Who here thinks Bitcoin is slow? Some, okay. Who here likes being lied to? This guy, we should talk. So, there's a lot that went into what happened with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is complicated. It came from parts of the internet that are unknown, frankly. Unknown, unknowable. Who is Satoshi Nakamoto? Where did it come from? What problems are being solved? I actually give a version of this presentation at the university level that's about 2 hours long because I go into the history of money, the history of computers, the history of cryptography, because really to understand Bitcoin is to be a polymath in all of those fields, including going off into tangents about monetary economics, human psychology, and a whole bunch of other things. So to be a Bitcoin expert is it's being a multifaceted Renaissance person, a truly curious person, and somebody that has to be very patient with what's actually going on. And so in 2008, Satoshi Nakamoto, he solved a very long debated problem in computer science called the double spend problem. Now, you don't have a double spend problem at places like Visa because, well, Visa runs the ledger, and if they make a mistake, like, somebody just goes and fixes it, right? You ever go check your bank statement and like, oh, they double charged me. Well, they'll fix that because they can fix that. That's how that works. But people try to do this in a decentralized way. How do we come to a distributed consensus? This is, imagine every table in here is its own Bitcoin node, and we're all trying to account for the ledger at the same time. So each one of you is trying to reconcile the ledger, and you're competing with each other, but to compete really well, you also have to cooperate really well. And if, let's say, this table, I got another Kurt looking right at me, which I appreciate, and let's say that their table solves the problem of the ledger. They reconcile it first. Well, their goal is not just to say, we won, right? We get the money. But they also got to get everyone else in the room to agree that that's the best version of this ledger. And so how do they do that? Well, imagine if I said, okay, everybody at this table, you gotta pound your hands on the table for 50,000 times. Not 50,001, not 49,999, 50,000. You all have to do it in unison. Seems arbitrary, right? But that's actually what proof of work is. So what it is I'm giving them an incentive in the game to say, we're willing to figure out how to do exactly 50,000 in unison. What does that tell you about us? Well, it might say that you're crazy, and that could be true. But it also says that they're willing to demonstrate an opportunity cost to say that it's so important to us to reconcile this ledger properly that the thing that we're doing is not about what we're doing. We're willing to look like fools. We're willing to waste our time, money, opportunity, the bruises you'll have on your hands to say, we did it, and we vouch for it, and it's my reputation on the line. And all of that to solve the double spend problem. So that multiple nodes don't come into consensus, but not actually in consensus, and you're fighting, and who has what money, and all these other things. You're trying to solve a problem of, is the ledger accurate? Why? This is the question. What problem are we trying to solve because of the solution to the double spend problem? Well, it's digital cash. If we read the introduction to the Bitcoin white paper, Satoshi Nakamoto explains, commerce on the internet has come to rely almost exclusively on financial institutions. So he basically explains what I just explained to you in a very basic sense. People need to make payments on the internet. In 2008, you had a couple of options. You had credit cards, you had PayPal. There's probably some other things around depending on what regions you were in. If you were a casino or a gambling institution, maybe you had some secret rails or whatever. If you're particularly wealthy, you can probably call your banker in another jurisdiction to like, hey, send this money, send me a bill, we'll reconcile later, right? But for the typical person, they don't have a way to send $1. Or, depending on the situation, like if you have a $5 minimum with something like PayPal, that's all well and good if we live in New York City and pay $80 for a piece of fish on a plate, right? But if I'm in the Philippines or Thailand or shoot, half the planet, frankly, if we go to Africa or South America, like, sorry, my pupusas are actually worth 9 cents. Can I pay for that digitally? No, you have to have physical cash, but the physical cash isn't always available, and so you got to work out something else, right? Bitcoin solves that problem, but not just that problem. If you look at what's actually being created here, he's talking about the increase in transaction costs because of the problems of mediation. And okay, are we going to fight about an 8-cent pupusa? No, probably not, but we may fight over, hey, you sold me this car and the car, it didn't work out. So that's where the law comes in and that kind of thing. But ultimately, he talks about small, casual transactions. This was the problem he was trying to solve for the world. And nobody cared. So the first conversations that Satoshi Nakamoto ever had was with a guy named James Donald. He put out the Bitcoin white paper, and immediately the response was, well, this doesn't work. We would need everybody to run nodes. Everybody needs to be an infrastructure partner. Who here wants to be an infrastructure partner in the payment systems that you use? Everybody, you want to be a Visa node. You want to have to like run some hardware, some software, a little bit of insurance, get a money services business license in order to use PayPal. Like, no, right? It's crazy. But this is very quickly where the cypherpunk notion went with Bitcoin. It was all these anonymous characters on the internet said, okay, here's how we make it that we can still do illicit business and sell drugs, and here's how we can ship it, and here's how I can, murder for hire schemes and some of these other things. Like, you create fancy internet money, and crazy people on the internet immediately say, cool, let's do crime. Like, okay, sure, like I can have that conversation too, but that wasn't the problem that Satoshi was trying to solve. We don't know when Satoshi Nakamoto lost control of the entire project. There are a few things we can point to. There were emails that were exchanged, Satoshi saying goodbye, telling Gavin Andreessen, the second lead developer of Bitcoin, like, hey, stop referring to me as a shadowy figure. Like, let's talk about like the tech and your devs and like how we should be proud of these things. Like, Satoshi really was upset about WikiLeaks, Silk Road, a number of other things. He did not like the crime culture. And then he just kind of disappeared. He disappeared slowly at first, and then he made some very bizarre changes to the code. And by changes to the code, I mean it went from very fast, very robust, capable of smart contracts and all kinds of other things to, we're just going to shut off most of the script stack. We're going to tighten everything up, and we're only going to be able to send medium-sized to large transactions, and that's it. Which, after Satoshi talking about all the things he talked about, it was very, very bizarre. Satoshi Nakamoto, in the first week of Bitcoin, was asked, where does this go? And he says, well, it either goes to millions of transactions a day or zero. And then he explained that we can already beat Visa today with existing hardware. Bitcoin, when it was created, was capable of beating Visa, in the opinion of Satoshi Nakamoto. This is why I asked, like, who thinks Bitcoin is slow? Well, you think Bitcoin is slow because it was implemented really, really poorly, but it wasn't implemented poorly by Satoshi. In 2014, we discovered, because somebody basically just used Satoshi Nakamoto's logins to start blackmailing people, saying, the message essentially read, hey, Satoshi, I've got you by the balls, is roughly what it said. I know your identity. I know your wealth. I know all of your secrets. Pay me, or I'm going to ruin your life for the rest of your life. Started to try to blackmail people that were running the SourceForge. This is where the original source code of Bitcoin was. Also the P2P Foundation and a number of his other logins across Bitcoin.org, Bitcoin Talk, and some other things. So Satoshi Nakamoto lost everything at some point. We don't know when. It was discovered in 2014 that this is what had happened. And so there's a lot of weird history as to, okay, when was Satoshi talking? When did Satoshi lose control? And why did everything turn into this general opinion that Bitcoin is slow and therefore we need Ethereum and Polygon and Solana and Avalanche and everything else? So in the malaise, in the 2014 era, all of a sudden venture capital showed up. It came from a number of different places. A lot of it was old world money. Europe, AXA Insurance is a giant firm out there. They have an investment wing that works in financial technology. You also had groups like Digital Currency Group, created things like Blockstream, Lightning Labs. The portfolio companies of the people you see up on this board are basically the who's who in blockchain today. They seeded companies like Coinbase, Kraken, Abra, BitGo, the Grayscale Trusts, all these other things. They created this economy around Bitcoin being slow and being a financial asset, and therefore needing third-party rails to facilitate payments and custody and all of these other things. Really great business models. Like, this is great ways to make money on technology that people think is slow. They think that it doesn't work. They think that it cannot be self-custody, self-sovereignty, and the ability to send global micropayments. And this is to the tune of like exponentially more than Visa. The technology to make Visa, MasterCard, and some of these other companies completely obsolete has existed for 14 years, and wouldn't you know it, nobody ever told you. Well, why not? Well, obviously MasterCard and Visa and some of these other payment companies don't want you to know that. They don't want Visa and MasterCard's rails to have to run on Bitcoin. They want Bitcoin to run on Visa and MasterCard, but that requires custody solutions and some of these other things. So here, put your Bitcoin in this box. We control the box. We'll even give you a little bit of interest if you just trust us with it. And here, you get a fancy MasterCard. You're now a client. You can go hang out at the VIP lounge at the airport, right? Good times, very disruptive. So, not to criticize, I like the VIP lounge, but we didn't solve the problem Satoshi Nakamoto intended to solve with the technology, and we still can't. People talk about, wow, but Ethereum, like, nah, yeah, whatever. So, by 2017, we had been arguing about what Bitcoin is for. There were these original people, the Gavin Andresens of the world, the Mike Hearns, the people that knew Satoshi, the people that spoke to him, the people that knew that the technology was capable of disrupting not only global finance, but also global data integrity and all kinds of solutions that allow you to be sovereign and to control your own identity, your privacy, your wealth, and everything in your own pocket. And then the people who wanted to ultimately consolidate things toward corporate investment and being very rich, which, you know, again, is not something that I want to criticize. It's nice to be very rich, but ultimately we chose all of that and very little of the other stuff, and that's really unfortunate. And in 2017, there was a split. Basically, the big blockers, the people that wanted to restore the original Bitcoin stack, the Bitcoin script, the things that made Bitcoin capable of complex smart contracts and global trade and payment channels and all these other things that you hear about are coming soon. You didn't know that they were in the original Bitcoin, did you? Literally, payment channels, the things that are like Lightning Network, these, you know, NFTs. Did you know the first NFT was on Bitcoin in 2014? Anybody? No, people don't talk about this anymore. So, so in 2017 there was a split. Bitcoin BTC basically went mainstream. Groups like CME Ventures and some of these other people are like, hey, you can trade futures and do all this other stuff. Don't worry, we're going the direction of financial asset. We're all going to be rich. Who's going to argue with that? Bitcoin cashers, they said, hey, we want to see if Satoshi was right. We're going to go that direction. Ultimately, Bitcoin Cash had another split. There was BCH and BSV. BSV is the restoration of the original Bitcoin stack. So there are about 20,000 blockchains today, and one is built under the assumption that, hey, maybe Satoshi Nakamoto was right, and we should give it a shot. Let's see if it works. Everybody else said no. All the VCs said no, all the big investment, all the big computer science firms, all the universities, everybody said, Satoshi was probably wrong. Here's our blockchain du jour. Crazy, right? Nobody tried Bitcoin? Like all the way Bitcoin, right? So BSV in 2018 split away from Bitcoin Cash, said, you know what, we're going to see if we can propagate 128 megabyte blocks. About 6 months previous, it was the consensus of everybody that anything over 22 megabytes, a 22 megabyte in a 10-minute period was impossible because of science, physics. Electrons can't do that, right? These are like the guys that, you know, you read these quotes like, you know, the patent office should be closed because everything's been invented, and then the date is like 1840 something, right? And like, this is one of my favorite things. So the 128 megabyte blocks, 128 times as much data in a single block than you can do on BTC, and BSV did it. And everybody's, yeah, but it's fake or whatever. And so there's been this crazy split among SHA-256 Bitcoin. The biggest beneficiary has been Ethereum. Ethereum has made exponential value for investors in the meantime, while all the Bitcoin politics have been trying to figure itself out. But yeah, Bitcoin is a fixed protocol. Satoshi Nakamoto said it was set in stone at version 0.1. And again, nobody listened to him. Like, I'd like to tinker, and I'm in a position to do it. Nobody even understands what I'm doing, and so I'm in charge now. And that continued to happen. But BSV today, since 2020, is a fixed protocol set in stone, no more changes, no roadmap, nothing to do, period. And the reason is it's also the only blockchain in existence where protocol level consensus does not choose what the network is capable of. Instead, there are policy limits among node operators. So I run a Bitcoin node. And by a node, I mean it's a few $1 million worth of hash power and data center servers, all these things that operate, and I get to choose. Am I going to try to mine a gigabyte block or a 4 gigabyte block or a 10 gigabyte block? And what size scripts am I going to do? Am I going to allow certain tokens to come across my network? And if I make the wrong decision and somebody else has more grit, more power, and different settings than me, maybe I get orphaned, but I'm the only victim. The chain doesn't split and cause all kinds of chaos. Bitcoin was designed this way to be anti-fragile at a technical level. And so BTC today is capable of about 7 transactions a second globally, which is essentially 0, might as well be 0. Ethereum is capable of about 15 transactions a second. This merge is coming. You know how much it's going to be capable of after the merge? About 15 transactions a second. They're just probably going to be a little bit cheaper, but maybe not if you read the most recent releases from the Ethereum Foundation. Eventually, at the very end of that road, they say it's something like 3,000 transactions a second. Not bad, but Visa's about 60,000 transactions a second, so we're still not playing in the same sandbox. You got lots of other things. You got Hyperledger, you have other players. The number one today is probably Solana at about 60,000 transactions a second, but what they don't tell you is about 85% of the transactions in their bandwidth at any given time is about consensus finding, and they have to be there. You can't strip those away. So there's really only room for 10, maybe 20,000 transactions a second on Solana either. So who doesn't like being lied to? We're back there, okay. BSV is capable today of about 100,000 transactions a second. Now this presumes a number of things. This presumes perfect infrastructure, perfect opportunities, everybody sends their transactions properly, but we've actually seen days just in the wild, not stress tests, not any nonsense, where there have been 25,000, 30,000 transactions a second go across the network. In fact, I hold the world record, wouldn't you know it, for the largest block ever mined with the Bitcoin protocol and using proof of work. It was a block that contained 2.5 million transactions in a 10-minute period. Most of the transactions in that block were NFTs, both minting, melting, transacting, people doing trades, people doing all, simple payments, complex smart contracts. You know what the average fee was for that block? 2.5 million transactions in a Bitcoin block. It was a 4 gigabyte block. The block only took 10 minutes to propagate. What do you think the average fee is? What do you think the average fee should be on a blockchain of such bandwidth? So setting the transaction record of all blockchains, a lot of traffic, you're thinking high tolls, right?
1 penny.
It's about a 10,000th of a penny per transaction. So we can disrupt the world. We can change everything. The future of Bitcoin is that we are going to laugh at 100,000 transactions a second or a 4 gigabyte block. Terranode is coming out in the very imminent future. In fact, we're going to be one of the testers of Terranode, and as the name would imply, we're talking about terabyte-sized blocks. Terabyte-sized blocks means millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of transactions per second, so that every single IoT device on Earth can be communicating with each other over the IPv6 protocol. They can be making micropayments to the tune of 10,000ths of a penny in order to do OAuth and various things to handshake your devices, make sure you don't get hackers inside your network because they don't have your private keys. It can be things like cybersecurity management, log management for critical government data. It can be communications. You can open a payment channel and talk over it. And it's completely secure because it's Bitcoin. And so we're talking above military-grade encryption for communications, money transactions, contracts, and all kinds of impressive things. And again, these are things that you haven't been told, because there's so much money in things like Ethereum, things like BTC, things that don't actually disrupt the things that Bitcoin was intended to disrupt. And so we have solved these problems. You are lucky enough to be in a room where somebody's willing to tell you that we have solved these problems, they exist. This isn't, again, like this isn't stuff that I intend to do in the next couple of years. Like we have the ability to beat Ethereum by orders of magnitude today. So if you want to move your projects, move your legally compliant tokens, documents, business, anything to a blockchain that can scale. Let's say you have 1 billion customers for your blockchain over the next year. There's one blockchain that can actually do that. So